Hello and welcome to Background Briefing, available 24/7 at backgroundbriefing.org. I'm Ian Masters, and today we'll examine a number of stories and issues in the news. We'll begin with Trump's Asian summit tour, which has him now in Japan and heading to South Korea tomorrow, where he will meet with China's Xi Jinping on Thursday. We'll discuss the reality versus the fiction our reality TV star president is spinning in Japan, claiming $550 billion in Japanese investment is heading for America, which is a tenth of Japan's GDP, that will be overseen by a fund Trump will control. We'll discuss what Trump calls a, quote, new golden age of U.S.-Japan alliance, and the likelihood Trump will come away empty-handed from his meeting with Xi to restore exports to China of soybeans from American farmers hurt by Trump's tariff chaos. Joining us is Michael Hudson, professor of the Institute for the Study of Long-Term Economic Trends, a Wall Street financial analyst, and distinguished research professor of economics at the University of Missouri, Kansas City, and a number of universities in China. He's the author of many books, including America's Protectionist Takeoff, J is for Junk Economics, an A to Z guide to the economics of reality and fiction. And his latest book is The Destiny of Civilization. And we will discuss his article at Counterpunch, Trump's Destruction of the U.S. Economy. Then we'll examine further Trump's meeting with Japan's new hard-right prime minister and prospects for a deal with China, and speak with Kent Harrington, a former senior CIA analyst who served as National Intelligence Officer for East Asia and Chief of Station in Asia. He is the author of several novels, and his commentary and analysis on global events has appeared in the Washington Post, the Los Angeles Times, Asian Wall Street Journal, and leading Asian newspapers. And he has a Substack column, First and Second Thoughts. And before we begin with our tax dollars paying for the bombing of innocents abroad and racist thuggery at home, as families are ripped apart and neighbors disappeared from our streets, shops, and schools, we find ourselves at a moral moment when America's better angels have to be mobilized against a cruel and corrupt regime enabled by political cowardice and judicial blindness. The only way to save our democracy from its current descent into fascism is a massive mobilization of people power against a plutocratic-funded 2026 Trump campaign of voter suppression and intimidation by masked government thugs. As Trump cowers the owners of the press and defunds public broadcasting, Background Briefing needs your support to keep providing a reality-based daily briefing that exposes the regime's malevolent machinations to protect and defend our constitutional rights and freedom of speech and assembly. We ask you to make a tax-deductible donation at backgroundbriefing.org/donate or at our foundation, publictruthmedia.org, and thank you for defending the home of the brave and the land of the free. And joining us now is Michael Hudson, the president of the Institute for the Study of Long-Term Economic Trends, a Wall Street financial analyst and distinguished research professor of economics at the University of Missouri, Kansas City, and a number of universities in China. He's the author of many books, including America's Protectionist Takeoff and J is for Junk Economics, an A to Z guide to the economics of reality and fiction. And his latest book is The Destiny of Civilization. And he has an article at Counterpunch, Trump's Destruction of the U.S. Economy. Welcome to Background Briefing, Michael.
Well, thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for joining us, Michael. And Trump, of course, is in Japan today, heading to South Korea tomorrow, and is going to meet with Xi Jinping on Thursday in Seoul. But in Japan today, he's talking about either economics of reality and fiction. He is a reality TV star, and he was talking about this $550 billion deal he's made with Japanese, where he's basically shaking them down, threatening tariffs unless they make massive investments in the U.S., which is a tenth of their GDP, completely unrealistic. And he's talking about how Toyota's going to invest $10 billion when they've said no such thing. So what I find extraordinary is that can this reality TV guy who's at war with reality convince the American people that we have a great economy while he's destroying it and making life difficult for Americans across the board? Not the least of which is he ran with J.D. Vance last time on a very simple platform, which was Trump and Vance will make food and gas affordable again. Well, food is now more and more expensive. And in fact, in a few days' time, 42 million Americans will lose their food assistance and face hunger. So I don't understand how he can continue to destroy the economy at the same time tell us how great it is.
Well, it's who are you going to believe? Your eyes or what he's saying? And he's much worse than just a reality TV host. He has a nutty economic philosophy that's the opposite of what made America rich in its protectionist policies that it had in the late 19th century. Politically, he wants to replace progressive income taxes with taxes on consumers and on industrial employers, but not the financial sector or the technology monopolies that are his main backers. He idealizes the U.S. tax situation that existed over a century ago before 1913, when the income tax was first enacted. His political aim is to use tariff revenue to replace, he hopes, the progressive taxes that he's been cutting on the donor class and the wealthiest 1%. And these tariffs represent a tax shift off the wealthiest Americans, off the 1%, onto the consumers and onto U.S. businesses. And so the businesses are going to be hurt even more than consumers. Right now, Goldman Sachs has just issued a report saying that the consumers are currently paying about 55% of the cost of the tariffs, but now that the inventories that have been accumulated before the tariffs are exhausted, probably this ratio will go up to 70% of the tariffs being paid for by the consumers. But the companies themselves are the ones who actually have to bear most of the burden of these tariffs. It's not going to be that the foreigners pay the tariff. What Trump has promised and pretended is that all of this tariff is tax-free. It's a free lunch for the United States. And it's just the opposite. It turns out to benefit foreign producers much more than the United States, and it actually subsidizes competitors that are putting American industry and employment out of business. For instance, companies in all other countries of the world are able to buy steel and aluminum and other basic raw materials at a much lower price than U.S. producers are having to pay under Trump's tariffs. There's sort of a common world price for all world raw materials. And for the past few centuries, every country that's seeking to become more competitive for its producers have tried to minimize tariffs on raw materials and inputs so that they can make their profits on high-end, value-added industrial products. But what Trump is doing is increasing costs right across the board because just about every industry uses aluminum or or steel, or else they use parts that are made out of aluminum. Whether you're an auto producer or a farm equipment producer, or even a beer producer making aluminum cans for your beer, you're going to have to pay. So what Trump has done is a travesty of the trade theory that's taught in every university and has been followed by every other country. And he's just doing this because he wants to cut income taxes on his donors, and he doesn't realize what the effects of the tariffs will be, and that it's obvious that if you say, well, I want to get support of the steelmakers union and the steel workers and the aluminum workers by having tariffs there, every industry that uses steel and aluminum is going to have to charge more for its products. And this is the opposite of being competitive.
Right. Well, of course, most of our aluminum comes from Canada, and he's slapping tariffs on Canada. But he's also threatening more tariffs on Canada, an extra 10%, because of an ad that was run during the World Series featuring Ronald Reagan in 1987, warning about what a terrible idea tariffs were and how damaging they are to the economy. And that really upset Trump because, again, it intruded on his unreality. Um, but there's another aspect, surely, Michael, and that is that Trump is monetizing the presidency and enriching his family to the tune of
Yeah.
about 5 million in a matter of 8 months, um, so, to the tune of about 5 billion in a matter of 8 months. And I think that one of the reasons he's obsessed with tariffs is it's a form of a protection racket. It's a form of extortion
Yes.
that he can make separate deals with all of these countries around the world run by dictators, so that, he's going to inflict pain on you. And, I'll ease up on you if you'll make a donation to World
Yeah.
Liberty Financial.
You're absolutely right. The political dimension is what it's all about. His tariffs were so high that they were supposed to threaten every other country and every industry that depended on the U.S. market for its exports with chaos if they didn't make a deal with tariffs. And the deal was Trump said, all right, I'm going to reduce the tariffs and not create chaos in your country, but you have to give a give back. Number one, you have to stop trading with China. You have to give up hope of dealing with the most rapidly growing market in the world, with the Asian market, China and other Asian countries. And you're going to have to pay what you rightly call a protection racket. You mentioned the Japanese deal at the beginning of the show. Trump wants $350 billion, not only from Japan, as a loan, an investment or a so-called investment, to be turned over to Trump personally to decide what industries are going to get this $350 billion investment. He did the same argument against Korea. And of course, that's where he's meeting now. And the Koreans say, we are not going to go broke. We cannot, by paying a 350 protection racket. It's cheaper for us if we did have the 350 billion, either to pay our own producers as a subsidy or what we're doing and what the Asian countries did earlier today. The ASEAN trade group has just increased free trade agreements among themselves. They've said, we're not going to be able to agree with Trump's shakedown. We're going to trade among ourselves, and we're going to give up the American market as much as we can to depend on each other. Well, here's what Trump wanted to do. If he had this 350 billion from these two countries, he could go to his big supporters in Silicon Valley and his other campaign donors and say, look, I can put all of this money in a subsidiary for you. I can invest in a subsidiary that you'll manage, and you will be able to charge whatever you want from this subsidiary and or pay yourselves such high dividends, such high costs of production of management fees that there are not going to be any profits to share with Japan or Korea. The deal was that they would get Trump would get 90% of the profits, they'd get 10%, but they won't even get 10% because the whole idea is to make other people invest almost three-quarters of $1 trillion and not have any profits at all. This is the biggest ripoff that any countries attempted, and it's led to an enormous reaction because when people do the math, they say, well, wait a minute, maybe we make at most, let's say we make $35 billion a year in a trade surplus and profits off our trade surplus with the United States. Do we really want to give all of the profits we'll make for 10 years to Trump to do what he wants, to increase, basically, to go to companies and say, I'll give you this money. By the way, would you like to invest in my crypto fund? Would you want to invest in my company? And a lot of companies have been indeed contributing to his buying cryptocurrency that he's done to support it is the payoff, under the table payoff, to get special treatment in the tax code, the import code, the regulatory code, to cut back regulations on companies. So when you said shakedown, that's absolutely right. He's created a strong resentment, not only in Asia, where he is now, but in Europe, where you're getting foreign policy leaders from Japan, Korea to the European community. They're facing an anti-American policy in voters, and probably the leaders of Germany and Britain and France are going to be voted out when the next elections take place. Unfortunately, that's 2 or 3 years away. And the Asian leaders have just come in. And the first thing that the new Japanese prime minister did was, despite her years of talking in a pro-American way, the first thing she did was say, we've got to revive our trade with China. And I've met with the heads of Japanese companies like Nippon Steel. And the CEOs have said, well, our plan is to be uh, focused on the U.S. market, but their second in command have told me, well, but we have a plan B, and that plan B is to shift over to China if it becomes unprofitable to deal any longer with the U.S. market because of its protectionist demands, its demands that we revalue our currency to support the dollar. So the geopolitics of Trump are as self-destructive as his economic theories. I won't even call them obsolete economic theories because nobody's ever had as bizarre a theory as he's had before.
So, Michael, what's going to happen then on Thursday when he meets with Xi Jinping? Already he's talking about, they say, first of all, they say that their staff worked out an agenda down in Kuala Lumpur in the ASEAN meeting. But, already Trump's talking about the need to take care of our farmers who are being hurt because of that China cut back on soybean imports from the United States because of Trump's crazy tariffs. Then they shifted the Chinese to getting soybeans from Brazil and now Argentina. And because Scott Betts and the Secretary of Treasury wanted to bail out his hedge fund buddies, they threw a lot of money at Milei, the ridiculous guy down in Argentina, who just won the elections because of U.S. interventions. But at the same time, he's selling his soybeans now to China instead of the Americans, getting their market back. I can't see Xi giving Trump the market back. What do you think is going to come out of this meeting?
Well, it's worse than you say. China is not going to give up its Brazilian market and Argentine market, which look like long-term reliable suppliers, while the U.S. is weaponizing its soybean trade. She knows that the United States can do what it tried to do against Mao in the 1950s. It'll impose sanctions on food trade with China, trying to starve it. Well, China is trying to buy soybeans from Brazil to provide Brazil with a Chinese currency to buy Chinese exports. Same thing with Argentina. But what Trump has promised is much worse. What he's asking Xi to do is what the United States and Ukraine are asking Russia to do. Let's have a ceasefire and go just a freeze. Trump says, let's go back to the situation as it was before. I'm going to undo the tariffs that I promised, and China will go back to normal trade, and they'll begin selling us their rare earths again, selling us what we want. Well, that is zero chance. The Chinese spokesmen have been saying for the last few weeks, the United States has imposed new rules of trade, the trade-based rules of using national security sanctions as a way of preventing trade with us. Now, what we've done are by blocking rare earths and other exports to the United States is a mirror image, tit for tat, for what the United States has done for us. There's no way that we can go back and stop these promises of renewed trade unless the United States rolls back the last 10 years of sanctions against us on these same national security grounds. In other words, the United States would have to not only remove its sanctions that it's imposed on its satellites like Europe, but it'll have to enforce European countries like the Dutch company that makes the chip engraving machinery that costs maybe 10 to 20 million dollars per machine. China wants to buy that. But the Americans say, no, you can't export anything that China can potentially use for a military purpose. You can't use any technology. You can't buy any of the American chips that are sophisticated with American technology unless we can put in stop special back doors where we can turn off the chips if we don't like China. So none of China is going to insist, oh, yes, of course we can go back to things the way they were before. But before about 10 years ago, before you begin with all this national security, you'll have to unwind both your anti-China policy and the policies that you've imposed on Europe to impose anti-China tariffs and other countries. There's zero chance that that'll happen because the anti-China policy is still the whole core of the deep state here, of the congressional military policy, the whole national security policy. And so Trump is just, I don't know why he is or his advisors are letting him promise that everything can go back to normal when the world can never again go back to normal. China knows that if it would resume its rare earth exports and its gallium exports and other key exports to the United States that there's no inventories now, no reserves, that the United States would use this interim year of let's see what'll happen just to accumulate so many reserves that China will no longer have this leverage to use against the United States. And I can guarantee you that China is going to use this leverage because it's the only defense it has against the American military and economic aggression and the weaponization of its foreign trade and investment and the dollar standard. It knows very well what's going to happen. I've lectured at many Chinese universities and been a professor at Peking University. So I'm in pretty steady contact with the Chinese, and they can't figure out how whenever there's a meeting with the United States has one version of the meeting, and the Chinese have another version. Same thing with the Russians. There are always two versions, the U.S. version of what Trump's talked about and agreed upon with the foreign leader, and the foreign version that is almost unrecognizable. So who are you going to believe? What is actually signed in a contract and what actually happens, or what Trump says happens and what the New York Times and other or supporters of Trump's national security policy are claiming?
Right. Well, there you go, Michael. It's not just the economics of reality and fiction, it's the politics of reality and fiction, or it's just in general, the reality TV stars at war with reality. It creates his own reality. And when you mentioned the restrictions on the latest AI chips, etc., that the US has on China, again, because of Trump's corruption, he made a deal with Sheikh Tahnoon of the Emirati. Sheikh, you buy $2 billion of my crypto and we'll
Yeah.
release the export restrictions on the latest AI chips. And many people think that they'll end up in China. So, where, where, where's the line here? National security versus greed.
Well, it's privatized national security and it's all up for sale.
I see. Let's now take a brief station break. We'll be back in a moment, continuing the conversation with Michael Hudson.
I'd love to get you on a slow boat to China, all to myself alone.
Get you and keep you in my arms evermore. Leave all your lovers weeping on a faraway shore.
Out on the briny with the moon big and shiny, melting your heart of stone.
I'd love to get you.
Welcome back. I'm Ian Masters, and this is Background Briefing, available 24/7 at backgroundbriefing.org. And we're continuing the conversation with Michael Hudson, who's the president of the Institute for the Study of Long-Term Economic Trends, a Wall Street financial analyst, and distinguished research professor of economics at the University of Missouri, Kansas City, and a number of universities in China. He's the author of many books, including America's Protectionist Takeoff and J is for Junk Economics, an A to Z guide to the economics of reality and fiction. And his latest book is The Destiny of Civilization. And he has an article at Counterpunch, Trump's Destruction of the U.S. Economy. Well, do you think then the one thing about the U.S.-China relationship is, you've got Taiwan as the flashpoint. Is there, and the U.S. is trying to get out of the Middle East, and so was Obama trying to get out of the Middle East to pivot to China, etc. But people like Netanyahu keep dragging us back. But in general, how do you see the possibilities of peace between the U.S. and China when you've got a lot of people in the Pentagon talking about war? You've got this ridiculous guy as the Secretary of Defense, who is just really so dangerously out of his depth. It's frightening. Since you've got good contacts in China, it doesn't look like they want to have a nuclear arms race with the United States, but they also are building up their conventional forces. Where is this heading? Is there any off-ramp here? Because it seems to me that the relationship has been deteriorating for some time.
I don't think there's really much danger there. For the last 30 years, I've talked to Taiwanese, and they explain that Taiwan's major foreign investments are in China. When I met with the Central Committee of China about 15 years ago, we were talking about rare earths even then. And they pointed out that it was the Taiwanese companies that are mining these rare earths primarily. So the ideal of Taiwan has been for a long time to indeed reintegrate with mainland China. What they want to do is get the best possible deal for themselves. They want money. That should not surprise you. They want to make profits. And they see that growth in GDP is China and other Asian countries. Taiwan naturally looks for its investments and trade to be there. It's trying to get the best arrangement it is, and it's trying to get everything that it can from the United States in order to use as a bargaining chip. Good deal with China, but all of this relation with the U.S. is largely as a satellite to back its ultimate merger with China. It much like occurred with Hong Kong. When you mentioned the arms race, it's really not much of an arms race. China has developed brand new military technology, missile technology, aircraft carriers, and a navy, submarines and surface vessels. The United States really doesn't have a modernized navy and doesn't have a modernized military system. And in fact, it's exhausted its raw materials, its arms, in fighting in Ukraine and giving them to Israel. So the United States is not in any military to fight against anyone except perhaps Venezuela, not for a serious high technology country, and not a country that whose leaders still think, well, we our future lies with Asia, just as the future of most other countries lies there. The United States can tighten its control over the European satellites that it has and get from the European Union the same kind of giveaway that it's got in the trade deal that it made with Ursula von der Leyen and Callas, the foreign representatives of the EU, but it can't convince other countries to make the same kind of giveaway because they don't want to be U.S. satellites.
Right. But why then, what's happening to the $1 trillion a year military budget? Where's that money going? If we're exhausting our inventory and the Chinese have new ships, we have old ships, etc. I mean, that doesn't make any sense to me.
The money's going into making of armaments that are not designed to fight the new forms of warfare that have been developed by Russian and Chinese and even Iranian technology. The whole idea of Pentagon capitalism is based on cost plus. The higher your cost of producing an arms, whether it's a ship or a missile, is, the more profit you make on 10% or whatever the profit guarantee is a percentage of your costs you get. So the objective of the military industrial complex is to maximize the cost of production in order to maximize its profits. It does the arms that it makes are not really for fighting in a war. You've seen what happened when you try to use the American tanks and missiles and other arms in Ukraine. They don't work. The Russians very easily penetrated the so-called anti-missile defense that the United States sells. The F-16s and the aircraft America has basically don't work. The tanks that America produced in Ukraine got shot up right away, so they really don't work very well. It's
Right.
these are not arms for. It's like wine. It's not the wine isn't for drinking. It's for trading. The arms aren't really for fighting. They're for charging and selling to one's allies as in the military shakedown.
So how come then, Michael, the Ukrainians are holding off the Russians, who have 4 times the population and a massive military?
Well, they're collapsing right now. The Russia has found an advantage in going slow. This gets off the tariff issue, of course. And by going slow, it's minimizing its own casualty rate among its soldiers. But the slower they go, the more the European economies, the NATO economies, are being torn apart. And by prolonging this war, Russia is creating month after month, election after election, an anti-American reaction that wants to withdraw from NATO. And if the EU constitutionally has to become a part of NATO, there's a rising pressure to withdraw from the EU, both from Hungary, Czechoslovakia, and now other countries. Well, certainly the voters that are backing the opposition parties that want to end this reliance on a military economy because the military overhead in Europe, given the monetary policies of the budget constraints, say that if you spend more on military, you have to cut back on social spending. Above all, the subsidies that Europe have had to supply consumers with for their electric and gas bills so they can heat their houses now that they can't get Russian gas anymore. So the whole fight of Europe against Russia to depend on American industries led to the deindustrialization of Germany and really the collapse of its industry. And this is an object lesson for the whole rest of the world for what their destiny will be if they follow this rely on the United States instead of other countries. The United States is going to do just what Trump has done. It'll be a shakedown, and using the economic power and military power and outright bribery is a
Right.
demand for exploitation.
I'm sorry, Michael, that we've run out of time here today, but I appreciate your joining us.
Well, thanks for having me.
Again, I've been speaking with Michael Hudson, the president of the Institute for the Study of Long-Term Economic Trends, a Wall Street financial analyst, and a distinguished research professor of economics at the University of Missouri, Kansas City, and a number of universities in China. He's the author of many books, including America's Protectionist Takeoff, J is for Junk Economics, The A to Z Guide to the Economics of Reality and Fiction, and his latest book is The Destiny of Civilization. And he has an article at Counterpunch, Trump's Destruction of the U.S. Economy. We're going to take a brief station break and back examining further Trump's meeting with Japan's hard-right prime minister and prospects for a deal with China. Welcome back. I'm Ian Masters, and this is Background Briefing, available 24/7 at backgroundbriefing.org. And joining us now is Kent Harrington, a former senior CIA analyst who served as the National Intelligence Officer for East Asia and Chief of Station in Asia. He's the author of several novels, and his commentary and analysis on global events has appeared in the Washington Post, Los Angeles Times, Asia Wall Street Journal, Washington Times, and leading Asian newspapers. And he has a Substack column, First and Second Thoughts. Welcome to Background Briefing, Kent Harrington.
Well, thank you very much, Ian. It's great to talk with you.
Well, thanks for joining us. And Donald Trump is in Japan, and he'll be heading to South Korea, where on Thursday he's to meet with Xi Jinping. He's also trying to set up a meeting with Kim Jong-un, maybe another one on the DMZ, where they walk across and do God knows what and achieve God knows what, but that's another conversation, I guess. But he did seem to have a warm rapport with the new Japanese prime minister, who's a protege of Abe, who was assassinated, and Trump was close to Abe. So she's making as much out of her relationship with Abe as possible. And then he also addressed U.S. troops on an aircraft carrier in Tokyo Bay, telling them, I'd love to have your job, which is rather odd since Trump was a draft dodger during the Vietnam War. He also said that that Toyota's going to put up $10 billion. There's not exactly any proof of that. So what's substantive here in terms of what was achieved in these talks, apart from the usual exaggeration?
Well, as you very well summarized, Ian, it appears to be another act in the theater of the absurd when it comes to claims and rhetorical statements from Trump on the road. The Japanese, of course, have been awaiting this visit with some trepidation, to include the new prime minister, who clearly, from the news reports as of today, performed exceptionally well in lavishing Trump with the praise that seems to be the standard fare for every foreign visit, and for Trump, a bounty of gifts, in this case, engraved golf bags. His friend, the late Prime Minister Abe's golf putter under glass. How could you do better than that? But the main point of this story from the Japanese perspective is to stave off the worst. And in this sense, Takaichi, the new prime minister, only in office a few weeks, did quite well. I think it's important to note that every Japanese prime minister from 1952 on has had as one of his and now her primary objectives, managing well the U.S. relationship because of the crucial importance of both the U.S. security guarantee and the U.S. marketplace to Japan over the second half of the 20th century and into the 21st. And in this case, Takaichi, taking a leaf out of the book of her late mentor, former Prime Minister Abe, excelled in her praise, in sitting with Trump, watching the World Series, in the gifts that she gave, in repeating the previous nomination that she had suggested for the Nobel Prize. It was a grand slam, to continue the baseball metaphor. She's also a hardline conservative, so her commentary on what should be done in terms of strengthening the U.S.-Japan alliance, advancing Japan's defense spending, focusing on China as the destabilizing potential threat in the region that both alliance partners had to deal with, just was right on cue. But you, in your summary, made reference to what Trump is touting as this massive Japanese commitment of investment funds, the returns from which the U.S. will rake off the lion's share. And therein lies the rub. That is an agreement with more air than substance. And clearly, what we're looking at in this trip is an attempt by Trump to both leverage the Japanese into believing and therefore agreeing that what the Japanese previously agreed to under Takaichi's predecessor, that was Shigeru Ishiba, is as defined by the U.S., when the Japanese fully well know that they don't have the capability, nor is the deal one that they could rationally defend before their own audiences, to put $550 billion at Trump's disposal in investment objectives that he defines. So there is a lot of sizzle being sold by Trump and his traveling party, but the steak, shall we say, is still in the freezer.
Well, the $550 billion of U.S. investments that Trump is touting, it's a form of extortion, right? I mean, he basically is forcing the Japanese to make these promises, whether they're empty or not, we'll see. And they appear to be empty, because otherwise he'll threaten tariffs. So, I mean, I don't think extortion is too strong a description.
No, I think it was the way in which the Japanese staved off the tariffs that Trump was threatening when the deal was struck. You're absolutely right. And he's continued to remind that his generosity is at the core of staving off in reducing the tariffs that he was threatening to impose, that it's at the core of this deal. But I think it's important also to recognize that the deal itself that he's touting is one that is simply indefensible in the Japanese context. And if you even look at what has been released since Trump left Japan, the background papers that are now in the media, that list the various quote unquote projects that the two countries are supposed to target this investment on. The lead language in this background paper says that these are projects in which there is interest, quote unquote, from companies in both countries. There's no suggestion of commitments for investment. All of the key players that you might expect in energy, infrastructure, technology are listed among the various projects in which companies in Japan and the US have quote unquote interest, but nothing goes beyond this very broad, vague language. And I think that's really key to make clear that people ought not to walk away with the top line or the headline in their mind of what Trump has achieved as some breakthrough in drawing foreign investment that's going to create American jobs. $550 billion from Japan equals 10% of Japan's GDP. Hello? I mean, are you talking about a prime minister who barely won her majority going before the Japanese parliament when Japan is facing its own issues with inflation, stagnant wages, and growth concerns, and arguing that Japan is about to invest 10% of its GDP, according to Trump, government funds as well as private sector investment in the United States, the returns of which, the vast majority of the returns of which are going to go to the United States in the form of into Trump's government investment fund and to American partners. I think you just have to stop, put the brakes on, and look at the logic of this for a new Japanese prime minister who barely won her job and who cannot pass legislation in either house without the cooperation of parties that are not part of her coalition. So this
Right.
is a this is something that, as I perhaps mentioned at the first, a lot of smoke, a good deal of mirrors, but what is behind all that? We will see.
Well, nevertheless, they did sign two, vague kind of agreements declaring, quote, a new golden age of U.S.-Japan alliance. And then on the aircraft carrier, Trump said to, and she was standing next to him, I've just approved the first batch of missiles. I just want to tell Madam Prime Minister they've been waiting for those missiles and we got them here right away. And he actually talked about hugging the missiles, which is very peculiar. The other thing that they're touting along with the missiles is this rare earth deal. It's interesting to note the US literally gave away its monopoly on rare earths. It's not so much the finding the minerals themselves, but it's the processing of the minerals which is key and has given China the monopoly. The way that China got the monopoly was that they bought a company in Indiana that was making these magnets for the Pentagon. And it was actually run by Archibald Cox Jr., the son of the Watergate prosecutor. And he had these Chinese partners who were relatives of Deng Xiaoping. And they just took everything. They took all the equipment, machinery, and they moved it to China, and the rest is history. So I find it extraordinary that the Trump administration is running around trying to catch up to the Chinese with rare earths, making these deals with Japan. I'm not sure what Japan can bring to the table in terms of rare earths, and Australia and other countries. But the untold story is that the U.S. short-sightedly gave away its monopoly on rare earths and handed them to China.
Well, that's my understanding as well, Ian, and I'm certainly no expert on that subject in a technological or technical sense. But the history of U.S. disinvestment and sale of capability is one that really makes you shake your head. And as you correctly noted, the agreements that have come out of the visit to Japan are ones that make the point of expanding our cooperation with the Japanese in developing supply chains or improving the supply chain, expanding the supply chain for rare earth minerals. The question, of course, is how, and that's exactly what you're pointing to. Let me note that this collaboration in rare earth minerals is only one of multiple targets for investment and cooperation. But the vast majority of the decision making that will surround how such agreements at the government level are implemented lies in the hands of the private sector. And as your brief summary of how we lost our advantage in rare earths unfolded, the question is going to be how U.S. and Japanese companies work out deals that also will involve third parties such as the Australians who have the resources in country that are crucial in this realm. I don't want to belabor the point, but I will repeat that the degree to which the promise of $550 billion of investment in key U.S. sectors hinges on the way in which this deal unfolds at the government level, however, is absolutely at the center of what's a promise and what will become a fact. The entire deal that is now touted by Trump is going to have to go before the Japanese government, and in doing so, that deal is going to be one that will need to be approved not only by the ministries involved, but it's also going to need to be approved by the Diet. If you want examples of what's at issue and what's at risk, I'd be happy to give them to you. But suffice it to say that some of the institutions that supposedly are going to be part of funneling this investment to the United States are enjoined from doing exactly what the deal calls for. For example, the Japanese aid and investment organization that is one of the channels that would put investment funds into US-based projects has to meet certain standards. There's a lot that goes into making any deal that has a government involvement with the private sector work. But this is really an enormous question mark, this commitment of $550 billion. And that is also an enormous albatross around the neck of the new prime minister, given her slim Diet majorities and given the challenges that Japan faces economically at home as well.
So, Kent, you mentioned that Prime Minister Takaichi and Trump watched the game between the Toronto Blue Jays and the Los Angeles Dodgers. They couldn't have watched the whole thing. It went for 18 innings, and the Dodgers finally won. But apparently they used gold pens to sign Japan is back on their baseball caps. And the Prime Minister said, Prime Minister Abe often told me about your dynamic diplomacy. I myself am so impressed and inspired by you, Mr. President. So that's it. That's de rigueur, right? You got to say all this stuff. Otherwise,
Well,
you're blacklisted.
you're familiar with, of course, the ancient Japanese theatrical art of kabuki, in which the actors on stage all wear masks, and the metaphor the metaphor of kabuki is one that should apply to what we're witnessing here. So what's going on the stage versus what's going on behind it, so to speak, as part of the play, is what I would encourage people to pay attention to. The theatrics and the rhetoric are par for the course to continue the, shall we say, the reference to golf that's such a beloved sport in both countries. But at this point, the only person that has so far scored a hole in one is the prime minister, who avoided Trump's wrath by showering him with the kind of over-the-top accolades, compliments, and in a way, now standard bowing and scraping that really disguises all that is left unsaid and undone in this very critical relationship. Keep an eye on this space would be my advice.
So just in the last couple of minutes then, Kent, what about the next step, South Korea? I haven't heard anything, or at least I don't think Trump's heard anything back from Kim Jong-un. Why he would want to meet with this guy, I, for the life of me, don't understand that. I mean, the recent meeting that they had with Putin and the three of them, they really rehabilitated this guy, obviously because he's sending troops to help Putin out in Ukraine. But that was a rogues gallery of all the world's worst leaders traipsing behind those three. So, and I'm interested to know what you've heard about what's going on inside China with the purge of the PLO, the People's Liberation Army's top generals. What's that all about?
Well, on the possibility of a Kim-Trump meeting, I'm skeptical that it will occur, but I say that with an enormous caveat, and that is what Trump is willing to do to keep himself in the spotlight and on every stop is not to be dismissed or discounted. For Kim, the behavior that he's demonstrated most recently with, for example, several short-range missile launches over the last several days preceding the visit to South Korea by President Trump, is giving you an example of what I think Kim would want from any visit, and that is acknowledgement of the fact that Korea, North Korea, is a nuclear weapons state, something Trump has alluded to, and something that's obviously a fact, but is a kind of statement that contradicts and in some ways rhetorically belies the longstanding American goal of denuclearizing the North. Trump, of course, as on many other issues, tried to have it both ways, claiming that he's pursuing that goal while simultaneously developing relationships that undermine the very effort to leverage your target country to bring them to the table for negotiating the end that you want. In the North Korean sense, I think any meeting with Kim would be more a public image than substance, and the likelihood that Kim, after demonstrating how closely aligned and supportive the trio of Moscow, Beijing, and Pyongyang have become, that any action by Kim that would open the door to a serious discussion of the nuclear status of North Korea's weapons and delivery systems, I think, is remote at best. The events in China are, to me, an example of Xi's increasingly tight grip on those elements of power that he needs to ensure his not only longevity, but his succession, which is really the big question forthcoming given his age. And that is who is next and how will that succession be arrived at? I think the degree to which she has focused on the military is also indicative of something else, and that is the thoroughgoing corruption that has been one of his targets is also an issue that goes to the very heart of China's increasingly assertive behavior and declarations that for all but suggest it has reached or is reaching a par with the United States and its military capabilities in the region and to a certain extent elsewhere in the world. So to put forth a statement that basically elevates China to the same status that once upon a time Russia and the United States shared as global nuclear powers, or simply to assert that China now has the capability to deny the United States access to the Pacific, a kind of access we've enjoyed since the end of World War II as a strategic partner and as a balancing power in the region, really requires a military that can deliver on the goods. And to that extent, too, she is, I think, demonstrating, though not necessarily wanting to advertise this publicly, that he's got some serious problems in the military with corruptions that go to the heart of his capabilities. And that's an area to be watched.
Well, Kent Harrington, I thank you very much for joining us here today.
It's a pleasure, Ian.
And again, I've been speaking with Kent Harrington, who's a former senior CIA analyst who served as the National Intelligence Officer for East Asia and Chief of Station in Asia. He is the author of several novels, and his commentary and analysis on global events has appeared in the Washington Post, the Los Angeles Times, Asian Wall Street Journal, and leading Asian newspapers. And he has a Substack column, First and Second Thoughts. And this has been Background Briefing. I'm Ian Masters, and I'd like to thank producers Graham Fitzgibbon, Sasha Linden Cohen, and Asher Price. If you missed any of today's program or would like to explore our vast archives, you can find us at backgroundbriefing.org, where we include extended interviews searchable by topic and have made it easier for you to sign up for daily email updates that provide links to resources, articles, and books discussed on the program. Also, you can find links there to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and we highly encourage your ratings and reviews on those platforms. Find us on Twitter and Facebook, as well as also now on Blue Sky at Ian Masters Media. And please do help us reach more listeners by sharing the program with friends, family, and colleagues. And to help us sustain this program into the future and ensure it remains free to all, please take a moment to support us by going to backgroundbriefing.org/donate, where your tax-deductible donations, large and small, keep us broadcasting. And I'll be back again tomorrow with another Background Briefing, and I'm always available at backgroundbriefing.org. Bye for now.
The guy that lived next door in 305 took the kids to the park and disappeared by 9:30. Who'll ever know how much he loved them so? That dark night alone in America. A quiet voice was singing something to me, an angel song about the home of the brave in this land here of the free. One time, one night in America. Four small boys playing ball in the parking lot. A preacher, a teacher, and the other became a cop. A car skidded into the rain, making the last little one to say, one more light goes out in America. A young girl tosses a coin in the wishing well. She hopes for a heaven, while for her there's just this hell. She gave away her life to become somebody's wife. Another wish unanswered in America. People having so much faith, die too soon, well, all the rest are made. We write a song that no one sings on a cold black stone, where a lasting peace will finally break. Sunlight plays upon my window pane. I wake up to a world that's still the same. My father said to be strong, that a good man can never do wrong. In a dream I had last night in America. A wise man was telling stories to me about the places he had been to and the things that he had seen. A quiet voice was singing something to me, an age-old song about the home of the brave in this land here of the free. One time, one night